Hey, everybody, we're back today. We're going to do one more session where we're talking about pop psychology and some of the crap that gets fed to us. Um, I was going from the list, but, one of the things that just popped into my head as I was saying that was one of the things that I deal with a lot working with couples is this idea that's perpetuated in society that uh, a, a good couple is one that knows each other better than they know themselves. And one, it's not even possible because you only have so much space in your brain to know you, and there's not enough space to know somebody else better than they know them. And when we do that, unfortunately, what I see is that couples get into a relationship with their impressions of one another instead of one another. And that's usually when I start seeing them is when they're fighting over, what you intended to do and who they are. And this is what you always think and things like that. So I think that's a myth in society that should be dispelled so we can get rid of that and make sure that couples stay curious about one another. I remember when I went through my divorce, one of the things that pissed me off was, we had been married 13 years and he was still ordering the same kind of pizza that I liked when we got together, even though I had changed the kind of pizza that I liked. And it is those little things at the end of a relationship that just, are the daggers. But
Well, all you want to be is seen and heard, right? And it's
yeah,
like, is that person paying attention to that you have changed, that you have evolved? You know,
yeah,
yeah, I tell people all the time that, two mind readers don't get together and learn how to read minds. What happens is two people get together and learn how to communicate enough so that they can actually be able to read their body language.
yeah,
And one of our survival skills is to be able to predict what's going to happen next. It helps
yeah,
us be able to know and survive and perpetuate the species. So when we get together, we're always often predicting things, right? And we have these unspoken expectations.
and it's a
And if we don't
mindless prediction.
Yes, yes. And those unspoken expectations, also help us predict or not predict what's going to happen next, right? We often get
Hmm.
it wrong.
Yeah,
So, I always say, how do you end up knowing each other at all is overly communicating with each other. When you
yeah,
notice a look on someone's face, instead of assuming that they're pissed, you ask them, "Hey, I saw that look on your face. What does that mean?"
yeah. Instead
Yeah,
of saying you're pissed and
exactly.
telling somebody what they feel, you should ask, is that
Exactly.
what
The
that
whole
is?
curiosity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Stay
And it's like when
curious.
we lose that curiosity and when we automatically start assuming the worst in our partner, that's when we end up seeing people in therapy all the time.
Yep.
They start assuming that their partner's out to get them or what they're doing is intentional. And it's usually never intentional. Usually it's just
Yeah,
that, what you're upset about is that person is not reading you, understanding you, getting to know you again.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, couples stop. When couples get together, they're learning about each other and understanding how each other sees the world, deciding what they like, don't like. But after a while, they stop having those conversations where they're curious about each other. And I tell all my couples, I always recommend this book. It's called 4,000 Questions to Get to Know Anybody. I think is what it's called. And it's available on Amazon. I didn't write it, so I'm not getting paid for it. But it's an awesome book. Lonnie and I use it when we're traveling. Um, if I'm ready to go to sleep, and because inevitably, if I'm not doing something, I'm sleeping in a car. So he'll be like, "Get the book, stay awake with me," and so there's 4,000 questions in there, and they're questions, about, your school life growing up, your childhood, your family, your um your positions on politics, sex, love, all kinds of things. But they're just random questions like, if you could have anybody over to dinner, who would you have? And so I'll ask the question and he'll answer it, and then I answer it, and then we go on to the next question. We usually just go through the page, but couples can do it however they want. But that
Well,
really keeps us learning about each
and
other
those
all the
questions, the
time.
answers change as we evolve too, right? Who you
Absolutely.
want to have for dinner when you're 23 is not who you want to have for dinner when you're
Absolutely.
50.
Yep. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does. Those questions are so good at helping keep that interest in each other moving. And the nice thing about that too is a lot of times, you get together, you start having kids, you start working all the time, and you don't make that time. So you don't have time to really be curious. You just have to react. That's that mindlessness,
Yeah.
that makes life easier for our brains. We use a measurable increase in energy to be conscious and intentional. So very little of what we do is intentional. But um, when you have all that responsibility, it's hard to get together and not talk about responsibility when actually we want to be known for more than just how we handle the problems in our lives and our responsibilities in life. So the book prompts questions that are completely unrelated to responsibilities and tasks, and help you connect to your past and your interest in things in the future, and
Yeah.
couples really get to know each other. So I love that book for that reason.
Yeah. Well, I think too, we evolved so much that, our love languages even change, right? Who we want for dinner changes, our love languages change. And,
Hmm.
what happens is we get so consumed with work, with kids, with life, that we often become very narcissistic in the sense that we're not paying attention to anything else other than ourselves.
Hmm.
Especially when we're
Yeah.
having a rough day or a rough week, or you're like struggling at work, we start to go inward, and we're not
Yeah.
really paying attention to those around us, the little
Yeah.
nuances.
And
So,
we mindlessly become very dependent on our partner to rescue us from whatever it is we're struggling with, but we may not be saying what we're struggling with. So, if two people stub their toe at the same time, whose hurts?
yeah,
Your
yeah,
own, right? All you can feel is your own pain and your own discomfort. And, couples get together and they're stubbing their toes all the time dealing with their responsibilities. But if you don't take the time to stop and experience life from your partner's perspective, you can't really empathize with it and engage
yeah.
with it. So
Well,
it
and think
can
about
leave
how often
couples
when you
feeling
stub your
lonely.
toe, your response is so like, oh, what the fuck, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is the partner's often like, oh, what did I do? Oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to do that. And for some reason, we often, as the spouse, take responsibility for something that's totally out of our control that has nothing to do with us.
Yeah, because that aggression is about the experience. It's not about anybody else that caused it. But yeah, sometimes we get frustrated and irritated by things that are happening that nobody intended. But yeah, conflict can start because I get pissed and he thinks I'm upset with him or vice versa. And that's just not the case. So you have to check with each other.
Yeah.
Is there
Going back to
something I
that
can do?
curiosity, be curious, you
Yep,
know, be curious with
absolutely.
people's intentions and your own intentions. Because I
Yeah,
don't think, our intentions aren't to, wake up and piss off our partner every day. Our intention
yeah,
isn't to like do anything with, ill intent. I mean, there's some
yeah,
people out there that are like that, but I think that's, the minority,
yeah,
but the
very
majority of
much.
people I think have good intentions. And, what happens is, our partners start to feel neglected. We start to feel unheard, unseen, and just, that's all we ever want in life is hear me, see me, get me, understand me.
Yeah. That's why I
Yeah.
like the example. I use this example with couples to help them understand mindlessness versus intention, or mindlessness versus conscious. And, if you think about when you learned how to drive a car, you're taking your driving test and you had to be conscious of the pedals, the turn signal, look left, look right. And you're in a very conscious state. And it overwhelms our body because we are using a measurable increase in energy to do that task and cover all the bases. But you do that, and now adults drive from one town to another and never think about the pedal or the turn signal. Our body just does it. But it's
Yes.
because we had that emotional experience. If I say imagine biting into a lemon, and the juice pouring into your mouth starts to salivate. right?
Right.
And the reason for that is because you had an experience with a lemon, probably when you were about 6 months old, and your parents are like, this is going to be funny. And they
Right.
fed you a
What
piece of
assholes.
lemon.
They're
Yeah.
such
And
assholes.
I love it. That's one of my favorite
With
things
our
to
new
do.
kids.
Yeah. But I'm sure my parents did it to me. I'm salivating right now. But that happened because we had that experience. Our brain creates a network. So you see it, think about it. And, I said that there's no lemon around, and my mouth started salivating. And it's only because that network was created so that the next time something like that happens, my body can prepare to get that taste diluted in my mouth. Right.
Right.
And all of our experiences create those networks like that so that we can just mindlessly, reflexively respond. But in society, I guess this is another myth to dispel, is that everything we do is intentional, or even the idea of decision making is as if everything is a conscious decision versus our brain saying this is the best thing to do reflexively. This is the
Yeah.
best thing to do. And when you do slow down, take the time to explore, am I responding to an experience that was wired into my brain from the past? And that's what's telling me to avoid or approach something in the present? Or am I actually present with, do I want to try this? Right? If we've had a negative experience, for instance, with, let's say, water, right? We have a negative experience with water. Um, and, let's say we're 8 years old, and now we're 25 years old and we're trying to learn how to swim. And our body's like, oh, no, 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 no. Doesn't matter that your size is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're 8 years old and you went underwater, but now it's thigh deep and your body's still going
Yep.
because
Yep.
your brain is designed to protect you, right?
Yes.
It makes those rules. And, learning to recognize safety in the present is also how you rewire those networks so that your body goes, oh, I'm bigger now, right? You change the context of
I
your
can
life.
stand in this water. I'm
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you think
exactly.
about driving too, right? They say that most accidents happen within 10 miles of the home.
Hmm.
Why is that? Because when you're out somewhere else that you're not familiar with, you are now not an autopilot anymore, right? You are
Yeah.
turning the radio down. You're telling everyone to be quiet because you're not sure of the surroundings or where you're going, and you're extra like alert. You
Yeah.
get 10 miles close to home, and all of a sudden, you know those back roads by like the back of your hand, right? You know what's going on, and you
Yeah.
start going on autopilot, driving a little faster, being a little more careless, being a little bit more like, whatever, I'm close. And that's why we have accidents that happen so close to home is, our body, gets close and we start to relax, right? Our brain's like, safety, we're almost there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's the way our
That
brain operates.
mindlessness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those aren't decisions. Those are how your body goes, okay, I can conserve energy now.
Yes. I
Yeah.
can get out of
Uh,
hyper arousal. I am safe. I know where I'm at.
yeah. I think that's another myth that kind of rolls into this too, is this idea that people are inherently lazy instead of understanding that biological component for conserving energy,
Yes.
right? And so we do things mindlessly in order to conserve energy. We do sit around and do nothing in order to conserve energy. But, you know, we're not, hunter gatherer days. You had to do the work or you didn't eat.
Right.
And that's not the same now. We can sit on our phones all day, and maybe mom's going to cook dinner. So I don't have to go out and hunt and
Somebody will
gather,
cook
but
dinner. They're going to get hungry
yeah.
eventually, and someone's going to be like, I'm going to cook dinner. It's almost like you're in a
Right.
standoff.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
also have to think, we're not, in that age where we have to worry about saber-toothed tigers anymore either, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about the big giant like predators. Back in
Yep.
the day, we lived out, in nature, and there were so many things that we had to worry about. So
Yep.
anxiety is inherently like something in us to keep us surviving. But
Yeah.
now we have anxiety oftentimes because, anxiety is, energy that has no place to go. And coming
Hmm.
from hunter and gatherers, we were always moving, we We're following the animals. We were following the seasons and all that. And now, we still have the same cues from nature,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not doing anything that we used to do. So
Mm-hmm.
anxiety at some point served a purpose for us with our perpetuation of the species.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, there's nothing to be anxious about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, everybody needs a level of anxiety. That's what makes us wake up to our alarm clocks, right?
Yep.
The alarm goes off and we go, what's happening? And so we all have some, but most of our anxiety is so driven off of our highly developed cortex and its ability to generalize experiences.
Yes.
If a mouse is in the forest and it sees a snake under a rock, it will avoid that rock to avoid the snake. If I walk through the forest and I see a snake under a rock, I'm going to avoid every rock, right? My
You're
brain
going to
is
avoid
generalizing.
the forest.
Yes, yeah.
Never going out in the forest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, our ability to generalize our experiences and our traumas is why those issues become bigger over time. Instead of learning how to use your animal brain and ground you back to there's not a snake under every rock. And it is safe in general to walk through the forest. But yeah, sometimes you may run into a bear. And
Right.
it's not because you did anything wrong by going into the forest. It's you're in the forest and there's bears and people, and the mathematical likelihood that any two are going to be in the same place at the same time is present, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has nothing to do with what time you got up. It's just a mathematical probability.
Well, and the intention of the snake and the intention of the bear isn't to like, oh, let's go find a human and fuck with their day. They're just trying to do their own thing and they're trying to
they're
survive.
like, lunch.
Yeah, and we automatically assume, oh my God, that bear wants to eat me.
Yeah.
Or that snake is going to attack me. They don't want to attack you. That's not their intention. They're just trying to like survive and do their thing.
Yeah.
But we've learned somewhere along the line that snakes, bears, dangerous, must get away from them.
Yeah. And that's why I think most of our trauma and anxiety is really based in the meanings we attach to our experiences as human beings, because we can, right? We have that highly developed cortex. So we attach meaning to things. And, people get into a car accident and they'll say, I should have gotten up earlier. I should have turned sooner. Well, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Many of them own more than one car. The mathematical possibility that a car and two cars are going to be in the same place at the same time is very good, right?
And that's why it's called an accident and not a purpose.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it has nothing to do with, right. It has nothing to do with what time you got up. It's that hindsight bias where we take what we learned after the fact and behave as if we should have known it then when you didn't know it. Right? So letting things
You only know what you know until you don't know what you know.
Yep. And you only know what you know when you know it.
Exactly. And sometimes when you think you know it, you don't know it.
Right.
Until you know it again.
What is it? What is that? How much wood could a woodchuck chuck? That's what I feel like we just did. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck
if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
A woodchuck could chuck as much wood as a woodchuck could chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood.
What? Because you only know what you know until you don't know what you know until you know what you know.
We're idiots.
Yeah, but thinking about too, like the snakes, right? The snakes and the bears. So as humans, our attachments, right? You have to look at our attachment styles, and all of a sudden the snake isn't just something in the woods. The snake's a person. The bear is a person, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how we grew up, because our biggest fear in life and our biggest hurt in life is when we're rejected by our parents.
Yeah.
And I tell people in relationships when they're older, I said, you've already gone through the worst thing you could ever go through, rejection and abandonment by your parents. Everything else is going to be easy from here. Yeah, it's going to hurt for a little bit, but you've already been through the worst. Right. But what happens that initial abandonment and rejection, what happens? Now you view the world as a bunch of snakes and bears.
Yeah. And that wiring was placed there from those experiences. Our brain makes rules about the world that we don't have control over. It's just whatever contextually matters to our brain at that moment.
Yeah.
And so it creates that wiring. And then, we're adults and we have our own kids and we realize, oh, that wasn't my parent rejecting me. That was my parent trying to teach me about how the world works. right? And
Yes.
then your brain
Hmm.
goes, oh, okay, I can let that go now. It
Right.
rewires the brain so your body stops taking action around.
My favorite part in the healing process is when adults start realizing my parents were human. Because
Yeah,
and for so long we put them on a pedestal and think they're superhuman and that they're perfect, right? And then we get to the age where we realize our parents are inherently flawed,
yeah,
and they didn't intentionally try to abandon us. They didn't intentionally try to hurt us.
yeah,
They were just preoccupied with their own stuff. And now all of a sudden you take that meaning away and you realize, oh, it's not about me. I'm okay. It was their
yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I use anytime people are talking about their parents and, shaming, blaming, guilting them and, whatever they're saying, I'll ask them, how old are you when you're an adult? 18. I get all kinds of answers depending on the person's age. But I'll say, what hour on somebody's 18th birthday do all the answers to the universe fall into their head?
When do you get the manual, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You get a knock on the
And
door
they
and someone's like,
always,
welcome to adulthood.
yes, there's always a pause. And then, I follow that up with it doesn't happen because adulthood is a cultural construct. It's our
Yes.
society has decided that's when it is. But our brains work the same throughout. When we're 25, that's when our brain gets more firm in its ability to make adjustments and take in new information, but it gets stronger that way.
Yeah, that development of that prefrontal cortex is a game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there's no time, but there's our we learn until we're dead unless we get dementia. So we're always making adjustments to that wiring that's in our brains. And so if you think of your parents like grown-up kids instead of adults, you understand they don't know everything and you can let them off the hook with thinking they were supposed to know everything.
Yes.
You give them a little bit of credit for knowing they can't know
Yeah.
everything
Well,
and
and think
they're
about all
gonna
that
fuck up.
conditioning that is done by our parents, right? I mean, that 0 to 7, the formative years, right? We had the most neural pathways in our brain, and
Yep.
everything that we believe to be true, this small of a period, we spend the rest of our lives trying to get over that tiny little period in
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you think your parents, like, that you're scared of them, right? So all of a sudden you're a 30-year-old adult and your dad is just like, blah, 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 and you're afraid. And I tell people every day, I'm like, you have to imagine your dad being emotionally stunted. Yes, he looks like a full grown man, but now imagine him at 8 years old, emotionally stunted, and he's wearing his big boy clothes and he's like,
Hmm.
rah, 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 rah.
Acting like an 8-year-old.
Yeah, I said, how would you treat an 8-year-old? Would you sit there and yell at them and get into a power struggle with them? You'd
Right.
probably be like, it's okay. Yeah. And you'd have a
Yeah.
little bit more like, he's only 8.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It
And
changes the meaning and so many things when you look at your parents like that differently.
there's nobody ever that gets out of childhood without baggage. It's still our job to unpack our own baggage. And there's no parent that's not going to fuck up their kid. And it's not
Yes.
because they intend to, it's because they don't know everything. And we have zero control as parents over how our children perceive the universe, right?
Yep.
So that as kids, we also have to be able to look back at our childhood and recognize our perceptions were not always correct, right? We only had a certain lens that we're looking through at any time, and sometimes there's other lenses that it could be seen through.
One
So
of my favorite movies that portrays a lot of generational things is Hope Floats. And at the end of Hope Float, she says, Mama said adulthood is the time we spend getting over childhood.
oh yeah, I
Yeah.
have her. I,
Yeah.
I remember that. I haven't seen that movie for a long time. The one
Yeah.
that I like is What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Oh, you know what? I haven't seen that since I was like 18 years old.
Yeah.
I'm not that
I
old. Holy
actually,
crap.
when I did my master's degree, we had to write a paper about that movie because there's all these family dynamics. And so you had to apply family systems therapy to that movie. And I absolutely loved it because it
I
felt
love doing
like,
those assignments in college because it made me look at things so much differently.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of my favorites. I should pull up that paper at some point and check it out and see
Yeah.
how it looks now after, 13, 14 years in practice, what it would, how it looks different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing that movie. I remember, wasn't the mom overly obese
Yeah.
and emotionally abusive?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Leonardo DiCaprio was I think on the spectrum. I don't know that they said on the spectrum, but what's the term that they use? Simple-minded.
Simple-minded.
Simple-minded. Yeah.
You got to think about how much those terms have changed since that movie came out.
Yeah.
And same with like Rain Man, right? Did you ever watch Rain Man?
Yes. I
I'm
was just
dating
talking about
myself,
that
man.
yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how autism and ADHD was presented to us when we were teenagers was autism is all like Rain Man.
Right.
And now we know how closely related and intermingled it is, comorbid with ADHD.
Yes.
And, now we're understanding, some of the value of an ADHD brain because of their ability to pick up on patterns differently than,
Yeah, it's really a sign of giftedness.
yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that they tested that is they did these computer games where people had to pick berries. And what they found is people with ADHD picked more berries. And the reason why is they could pick out the patterns where there was more berries. And so they would go to where there was more berries, where other people, neurotypical people, would clean the whole tree before they go on to the next, or clean the whole bush before they go to the next bush. And it is more efficient to go where you see that cluster of berries.
That's
So
funny that
they're
you say
starting to
that
say it's
because
evolutionary.
I was at a baby shower in California, and one of the people had an orange tree and a lime tree and a lemon tree in their backyard. I'm like, can I go pick your oranges? Because I've never picked oranges before. And they're like, sure. And I came back with like 3 bags of oranges and lemons. And they're like, we just thought you were going to pick a few. And I'm like, oh my God, they were all so ripe in this one area.
And your neurodivergence is like, this is awesome, instead of, should I share?
Everybody looked at me like, okay.
Sensory seeking.
Oh,
That's
I had so much fun doing it too. The smell was so fresh. I just couldn't stop.
Bet. That's cool. Now I have to do it because I want to smell it.
And there was one tree that hardly had any, and the other tree, there was a tree really close to it. This is my reasoning. There was like 3 trees really close to each other, and I could pick all of the different things just by turning around and just putting them all in the bag versus going to the trees that were far away from each other.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And that just made me think again about those components with being on the spectrum, is that sensory seeking. And when you talked about it and I could smell it, the next thing I thought about is this squishy thing. My son gave it to me. He was over one night and he actually had this one, but he's like, I brought you something, Mom. And he brought me a purple one. And I was like, well, I want this one because it looks like it tastes good.
It does, doesn't it? It would be like so mouthwatering, like you'd bite into, it'd be so refreshing.
Yes.
I got my silly putty.
Oh, that's
I hate the way it smells though. It just smells so gross.
Yeah. You need to put it in some comic strips
and then my hands smell. I hate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put some soap on it and wash it.
And part of me being on, highly functioning on the spectrum is because I do have those sensory things that are, everything smells. I can smell everything. And when I can smell it, I can taste it. So like, if I can smell something, everyone's like, you got to try this. And if it smells bad to me, I'm like, no, I can't. Because automatically I get that gag reflex.
Yep.
So I'm very picky. It's crazy. I know I'm a 50-year-old woman, but I'm really picky when it comes to textures, sensations, smells.
Me too.
I have a really hard time. I will vomit.
Yep. I have a major gag reflex. But the cool thing about it is, as I've learned about memory reconsolidation, I've changed a lot of those senses in my body. I built tolerance for them. Like the idea of wet hair used to make me throw up, let alone trying to clean the drain. And I actually used some memory reconsolidation, and now it doesn't bother me. I can clean the drain myself. But
well, it's so funny because my son, when he was little, we would watch The Grinch. And there's that scene where the Grinch is just eating all the food. And every time that would happen, my son would projectile vomit.
Oh, how funny.
Every single time. So we had to learn that we can't watch The Grinch, or we have to fast forward through that time, because automatically, even the cues of one of that coming up, he'd start to gag.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I've always had that. Smells definitely make me
Yeah.
gag.
And it's funny that the little things that we associate with that, and it comes from, being able to survive. We've learned, from evolution, that certain things will kill us, certain things will make us
Yeah.
sick. And, back in the day, when you think of the caveman days, we didn't have the medicine. So you ate a poisonous flower that smelled bad. What happened? You died.
Yep. And
Yeah.
who knew they were talking about Lonnie's farts? We're going to make you sick.
I don't think I've had the pleasure of smelling his farts yet.
Oh, and you do not want to. It's wicked. I have definitely come very close to throwing up.
God, when I was in the Navy, the guys in the dive shop would eat tuna fish. They eat boiled eggs. They do all this
Oh, yeah.
combination of nasty food, and they would have these fart offs. And I was just like, I couldn't handle it. Like, the minute that I'd even hear
yeah.
it, or even
Now, if the sound of a fart, I think that's hilarious.
the
But
sound, but when you have experiences with the sound, then all of a
eggs,
sudden the smell, all of a sudden
yeah,
the sound, you're like already bracing for
it's
impact.
associated. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't like. I can't stand the smell of eggs. I also I'm a huge texture eater, and
Yeah.
like hard boiled eggs, I will throw up. I cannot stand the feeling
I
of it in
cannot
my
eat the
mouth.
yolk. There's something about the texture of the
Now
yolk. I like the whites.
I
Yeah,
like
but the
the yolk,
yolk.
and I can't touch the white.
Yeah. And then have you heard about the egg ick? So apparently
Mm-mm.
there's a thing that's called the egg ick, and it's like you can only eat so many eggs before you get the ick. And
Uh-uh.
sometimes you'll be like a bite in, and all of a sudden the ick happens, and like this is like a known phenomena.
Huh. Lonnie doesn't have that. I can promise you. He will cook a whole carton of eggs, hard boil. We have a little 8-minute egg cooker, and 13 minutes. I don't know. $8, 13 minutes.
Nice.
I remember numbers.
You should do a commercial for them. We got the 13-minute egg cooker.
Yeah. Costs $8. But he'll cook a whole carton of hard boiled eggs, and the kids give him grief because he brought like 21 eggs
Is he
camping
like
with him.
Gaston
Yeah, he
from Beauty
loves
and the
eggs.
Beast?
Yeah.
He eats
Yes.
12 dozen eggs.
Yep. 21.
21 eggs.
Oh yeah, 12 dozen eggs. That's funny. Yeah. So the kids still give him grief about that because he will. I don't think he has the egg.
All those cues, right, come from evolution and our conditioning of survival.
Yeah.
We learn to like eat certain things, smells, like certain colors. We learned along the way with evolution that, like in nature, things that are usually pretty colorful are pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
although we're no
I
longer
love colors.
living in nature, when we're out there,
Yeah.
sometimes we have a tendency to like be anxious because we haven't been living there, but that anxiety has been instilled in us from evolution.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and it's so important for people to understand how their experiences create that conditioning, just like with the lemon. I know a lot of my discomfort with eating eggs came from my grandma forcing me to eat soft-boiled eggs in the morning, and the slimy white that was in the middle, and I just couldn't do that. But because I understand that, I've also conditioned myself to try different things and experience those things again, and intentionally build tolerance and presence for it, recognizing I'm safe, and how does this actually taste, and is it just the feel. And so you can actually change your senses that way.
Yeah, it really is talking yourself off the ledge, right? All those
Absolutely.
irrational fears we have, it's telling ourselves, I'm safe, I'm okay, nothing bad's going to happen. It's just eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're mindless rules that your brain has made. That's what becomes our beliefs, right?
Yes, and we die on a bridge with those beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But once you understand the brain, it becomes really cool to see when a belief changes.
Yes.
And it's, the way it happens is, you have an experience and you get this big surge of dopamine, and it creates this network And every time you have the same experience, dopamine meets that threshold again. But when you do something outside of that, meaning the level of dopamine production meets the threshold of that in that network. But once you experience something outside of that, it's called a mismatch, a disagreement between what is expected and what occurs. And the reason for that is because dopamine production moves across the threshold and your brain goes, oh, let's make a new network. So it takes that new network from the original one and rewires it, which is why we don't go through all those phases. Oh, I like it. I don't like it. I like it. I don't like it. It just makes an adjustment from that network. And it's actually how quickly you can rewire your brain when you understand how it works. It is so much about that production of dopamine and
But also it goes in the
challenging
other
yourself to
direction too,
experience other
right? You
things.
could have no fears in your life, right? You could just be like, go in your life, happy as could be, but all of a sudden you have one bad experience and then what
Yep.
happens?
Yep.
It's so it goes either way. You can already have preconceived notions and then, realize, oh, yeah, great, I'm okay, I'm safe. But all
Yeah.
of a sudden you believe you're safe until you're not, and then what happens? Same thing,
Yeah.
right? It
Yep.
really is now being, our brain is always going to do its best to, going to do its best to protect us and keep us surviving and to be able to
Yeah.
predict what's next. So it really comes down to knowing that oftentimes our brain will lie to us.
Yeah. And it's just because our brain contextually responds in that moment to what's happening, makes a rule about it. And the possibility of that being exactly like that again in the future is so little. Like
Right.
people will get into a car accident. They say, I'm never getting into a car again. But they're ignoring all the times they've been in a car and nothing happened.
Right.
Right. So they make this rule. And once they go beyond the threshold and they start to experience, I'm okay again, the body goes, okay, I don't need that rule anymore. But
I got to
if
tell you, I had a car accident 2 years
I
apart from
know,
each other in the exact same spot with the exact same thing happening.
yeah,
And the first time I'm like, just a fluke, right? So now the second time it happened, because both times my cars were totaled, I avoid that area completely. I will take the
right,
long way. I will like sit through traffic and rather than have to go down that hill again.
right, yeah. Well, and I mean, what would it feel like for you to be like, I'm gonna fucking try to do it 3 times? You're,
My
you're
insurance company will drop me.
no doubt. If you touch that road, you're cut off. But
You're
even
not allowed to drive anymore.
right. Even entertaining the idea of trying to do it again is better than having that constant avoid state that your brain is using and strengthening because the likelihood of it happening 3 times is very small. I'm sure way
Yeah.
smaller than it was for two, especially if it's on a road that you drive on all the time. And I think they were both ice related, aren't they?
Both ice, -6,
Yeah.
pure ice.
Yeah.
The lady who lives there said 10 other people had hit it before me. So it was the road
Yeah.
conditions. And now even,
So
it's so weird because I have to remember, okay, it's 60 degrees outside. There's no ice. I'll be okay if I go down that
yeah. Yeah.
hill.
And I think that's one of the silly ways we can challenge our anxiety or trauma is even to be like, oh, maybe it's not the road. Maybe it's -6. I won't
Yes.
drive if it's -6.
Yes.
Right? You
Yeah. The
change
city
that
doesn't come
target
out
a
and
little
salt the
bit.
roads. So yes,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not, it's
Or
not
I'm
me. It's the city. It's the roads. It's the
yes, I
weather.
won't drive if it's snowing,
Yeah.
on that
My
road.
insurance company asked me, like, whose fault do you think it is? I'm like, the city and Mother Nature. They're like, unfortunately, it's your fault.
That
They're like, it's
sucks.
driver error. And I'm like, the city did not salt their roads. They didn't come in, they didn't plow, they didn't salt. I said, 10 other people hit it before me.
Right.
So, but what are the
That
odds that I would crash
sucks.
and total 2 cars in 2 years time frame?
No doubt.
All within like 2 years and like 3 days of each other.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That sucks. But did you get your new car?
I did. I got a Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's this beautiful red color. She's
Nice.
gorgeous. Yeah.
So you'll be able to see it in the snow.
A really quick story. When I grew up in Wisconsin, we had a snowstorm and my car was white and my car just broke down in the middle of the snowstorm. So we moved it to the side of the road and then we came back to look for it later. But the snow plows had come through and there was, I think we got like 4 feet of snow and I could not find my car because it was white and the snow was like burying my car.
Oh,
So it took
wow.
us like 6 hours to find out where my car was.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I remember the first time I spun out in the snow on black ice and I kind of slid off the road a little bit. I did a whole 360 and then kind of slid off into not quite a ditch, but it was definitely an embankment and rested up against um, a milepost.
Oh,
So we were, I think that kept it from going off. But, then my
thank
friends
God for
died.
that milepost marker. And exactly, you knew where you were, so you could tell the people on AAA.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was right outside of a friend's house. So her dad actually came out and pulled me out.
Good.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just this. That was the first time I ever did anything like that. I think I was 16 at the time. Scared the shit out of me.
Right.
So,
Especially when you're that young and something happens, it really has an imprint on your driving and learning, because you're learning at that point, at that moment.
Yeah. So I definitely don't love driving in the snow.
Yeah, I'm done.
On ice. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I'm done driving in the snow.
Yeah.
All my clients out there, when I tell them it's snowing, I'm like, can we do virtual? They're like, why? Because I live at 7,000 feet elevation. My office is at 5,000. So the weather down there is different than the weather up here. So we'll have gotten like 12 inches of snow and they maybe have gotten a dusting.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah. So my clients were probably like, well, it didn't snow very much. I'm like, oh, up here. I send a picture. I'm like, look what we got.
Right.
I'm like, I'm not going out there.
Yeah. Well, so I guess before we end, we should touch on the one we were going to start with, is the Himalayan salt lamps. I just think it's funny that they're all the same shape, like they came out of a factory.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're all the same shape. They all have the same little things inside of them. So I'm not even sure. I know salt is good for you. Like they have all these new things where you can go sit in a Himalayan salt room.
Have you ever licked one? Because I think about it every time, but I don't want to get all the dust in my mouth.
I'm going to go do that when I go into my office later.
Really salt or is it plastic?
I'm going to go lick one and find out. I will let you know next week. You'll see me in the store.
I'm dying to know, and I don't want to lick it.
I have one in my office. I'll lick it later, and I'll let you know next week.
That's awesome. I think it's fair, though. Anything, depending on the person, perception matters. And if somebody perceives that as being something that's calming and soothing, who gives a shit?
With that, most people, when they have the Himalayan salt lamp on, what are they doing? Probably doing yoga, doing meditation. Mm-hmm. So the automatic assumption is it's the salt lamp, but no, it's your effort to actually sit and be in the moment and be mindful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And putting yourself in an environment that helps you downregulate your body so your body functions more efficiently because you got that prefrontal cortex active. And so who cares? I don't believe it.
If you like it, you like it. If it works for you, it works for you.
Yeah, it looks like a dust collector for me. So, but I appreciate what has value to other people. So
yeah, I like mine because it gives me ambient light and it plays music.
Oh,
yeah.
I would guess it's not going to taste like salt.
Well, I'll let you know.
Does salt play music? It's got this little gnome inside.
It's got a little bass that plays music, and it's very calming music. So I will go lick it later and let you know what my results are.
That's awesome. Well, so we'll call it a day today, and everybody subscribe, share, reach out, ask questions. You can email us at mindwiseinstitute.com. You can find the pod website there, and you can message us from there. You can also message us on YouTube, Spotify, all the major platforms. So feel free to reach out, and we'd love to answer your questions on our next podcast.
We want your feedback. We want your participation. So please join us. Please be part of this. Yeah. Remember, stay curious, stay mindful, and, absolutely. Find that joy in life. Bring the things back that used to bring you joy.
Absolutely. Stay present.
Thanks, have a great week, guys.